You're listening to episode 12 of The Secular Buddhist. Hi everyone. Today we'll be speaking with Lawrence Levy of Juniper, so sit back, relax, and have a nice caribou coffee. Maybe a chocolate coffee cooler would be best. As a modern human being, approach a practice that's 2,500 years old. Is it relevant to you? Does it help you with your day-to-day stress? Does it foster your personal growth? And most important, does it give you a methodology that enables you to put that growth into practice and plant more seeds as you go? As people who have a personal development practice based in Buddhism, a religion, we might find it challenging to find resources that fit our needs in modern life. Juniper is one such organization. Today we're fortunate to have with us one of Juniper's founding members, Lawrence Levy. Born in London, England, Lawrence moved to the United States as a teenager. He studied business at Indiana University and law at Harvard Law School. A successful career in law and the high-technology industry culminated at Pixar Animation Studios, where he was chief financial officer and a board member. For the past 10 years, Lawrence has been studying, training in, researching, and writing about Buddhist methods and philosophy. Lawrence leads Juniper's development work, is the principal writer of Juniper's written content, and lectures on Buddhist training for modern life. Lawrence lives in Palo Alto, California with his wife Hillary, also one of Juniper's founders. And today we're talking with Lawrence Levy of the organization Juniper. Lawrence, thanks for being here.
I'm delighted. Thank you.
So I'd set up a link and had mentioned juniperpath.org is the location. So people listening to the podcast, if you don't go to the website for the Secular Buddhist, you'll find a link there, but go to juniperpath.org is the website address. And one of the members there, one of the founding members, had reached out and had posted a link on the Facebook fan page, and I took a look at the site, and it was absolutely wonderful. And what I wanted to do was get one of the founders to chat with us for a while and tell their own story. And maybe, Lawrence, let's start with this, is what was your background and what brought you into a Buddhist kind of practice?
Well, my background was fairly far from a Buddhist kind of practice. I had a background as a professional, as a lawyer. I went to Harvard Law School. I became a lawyer and partner of a famous law firm out here in Silicon Valley doing technology-related work. I then went on to I had a business background. I went on to become the chief financial officer of a couple of well-known Silicon Valley companies, the last of which you probably heard of, that was Pixar Animation Studios.
We might have heard of those, yes.
The movie company. And I was a person there during the mid-90s when the first films were coming out, who was responsible for their business strategy and public offering and all of those things. So I had a wonderful career. I was proud of it. I look back at it with great memories. But at the same time, I was always interested in what I'd call the deeper dimensions of life. What else is there? I was a closet philosopher of sorts. And I remember even way back in law school, I would be sitting in the bookstores of Cambridge looking at meditation books, wondering what this was all about. But my life at that time didn't really take me in that direction. I had this career, I had a family, and everything on those fronts was great. But the time came in about 1999 when I had really a chance to take some time off. And I decided to do that, to go deeply into that other dimension of life, to go figure out, was there something to it or not?
Uh-huh.
So in 1999, I did that, and I naturally gravitated toward what I would call Eastern ways of thought, Eastern philosophy, Eastern thinking, although I was interested in all religious and spiritual practice. So for a long time, I read very widely, Western and Eastern and secular and non-secular. I was interested in it all. But it quickly focused more and more into Buddhist thinking. And I was drawn to that very, very strongly. And so within a year or so, essentially I put aside everything else and decided to go into that one area only. And that's probably been now the last 8 or 9 years that I focused exclusively on what I would call Buddhist training. And my interest was, a lot of people say to me, did I go to Tibet or did I go to India? Did I go somewhere to do this? It's one of the first questions I'm asked. And my answer is no, because my goal always was that I felt that one's spiritual life, whatever we want to call that, must grow from the ground that we're standing on. And the ground that I was standing on was Palo Alto, California.
Right here, yeah.
Right here. So that's where I wanted it to flow. So I did not go to those places, although I did have some amazing teachers. And after a year or so, I met one in particular, Segyu Rinpoche, who is another of the founders.
Yep.
And I focused exclusively on working with him and his lineage of teachings, and that probably takes me up to 2001, something like that.
So what was it initially that drew you to Buddhist ways of thought? Because you'd studied and been reading on your own a lot of different philosophical approaches. What was it that resonated most with you on that?
Well, there's two things I would say. I consider that while we know Buddhist thought began about 2,500 years ago, we don't know exactly, but roughly 500 BC. And for the first 500 years of Buddhist thought, the focus was on escaping what was called the cycle of existence.
Samsara.
Escaping samsara, escaping suffering. To me, it took 500 or 600 years for Buddhist thought to mature. And it happened somewhere around the year 200 or 300. And it happened in the works of what we look back on and call the works of Nagarjuna, or the works of the perfection of wisdom. We don't really know who wrote these things, but the works are there. And they brought together two streams of thinking that, for me, represent a high point in human thinking. One is that there is this deeper dimension to life, that we're able to go off and cultivate a potential of the mind that is beyond just the day-to-day. And there's a path of training in order to do that, in a way to overcome the locality of our life, and to take a bigger vision, a more expansive vision. But the second thing that it said, and this is what happened around that time frame, is that, but when we do that, we must come back to the world. And there was born the idea of the Bodhisattva, or as Joseph Campbell famously called it, around the year 1930, the hero. And the journey of the hero is to go off, get this amazing training, but don't forget about the world.
I'm reminded of the 10 ox herding pictures where it slowly fades into nothingness, but then by the time it comes back around, you're back to the original ox herding picture. You've had your experience and you come back to reality.
Exactly. Well, this idea had a tremendous appeal to me. It really resonated with me. It said something. It just made sense that, yes, we don't forget about the world. This is not a path of escape. This is a path of turning in, but at the same time, remembering the world at the same time. So we come back, and I think when we turn in like this, what we come back as is a more effective force in the world, however we want to put that to work. And so I was very drawn to that idea, so I decided to go in and both study it and train in it the best that I could.
Mm-hmm. So is that where Juniper started to first get its seeds of growth is from that idea of teaching and moving forward in a practical approach to Buddhist thought?
In a way, yes. I'd say there were sort of many strands that came together for Juniper to get started. So Segyu Rinpoche is a profound spiritual master. I don't really know any other way to put that. He was a Brazilian-born. He was born in Brazil, raised in Brazil. He went to school, became an engineer, was very successful over there. But as you may be familiar, in Brazil, they have a very strong healing tradition. And he was recognized at a very young age as having great capability in those healing traditions. And so while he was also living a conventional life, he was also being trained in this dimension. And he became a very well-known, very charismatic healer and spiritual man in Brazil. But he was told, and he felt through a number of different circumstances, that wasn't the end of the line for him. And essentially, he was told that he needed to leave Brazil and find his way in America, which he did. When he came to America, it wasn't long before he was recognized by the Tibetan Buddhist tradition as a master of their community. Now, this is the most extraordinary event because it was completely unbeknownst to him. And there are many stories around this that we can share at some point. But what eventually happened is that he was embraced in a very deep way by the Tibetan Buddhist community. And his teacher or guru became Lati Rinpoche, Kabje Lati Rinpoche, who was one of the most renowned masters of their tradition. Lati Rinpoche was a teacher to the Dalai Lama in the 1970s. He came over to the United States in the 1980s. He was instrumental in bringing Buddhist teachings to America. And Rinpoche became probably his closest or one of his closest students. And he studied with him for 25 years. Lati Rinpoche, by the way, died just 2 weeks ago, which was quite a big event for us. Yeah, then we sort of took that as an opportunity to absorb all of the energy and elements of that lineage that we could. So Rinpoche had now been trained essentially in these two traditions. He had been trained as a healer in Brazil. He had been trained at the highest levels of the Tibetan Buddhist community. But the message to him was always the same. It was that your work is in the West. Your work is to happen in the West. You have to make this happen in the West. Mm-hmm. And so he started that by creating a fairly traditional Dharma center, which was in the sort of Tibetan Buddhist tradition, and that was doing very well. And then he and I and my wife Hillary, who's also a founder of Juniper, met in about 2001, and Hillary and I had been pursuing this kind of path on our own, and we were aware of the needs and the limits of encountering these cultural difficulties in the West, and we were interested in that. And it turned out that Rinpoche was interested in that too. And so late in 2002, and a lot of this came through Hillary's prodding, we were interested in this idea of what it is that could be done for the West. And eventually we, as we got to know Rinpoche and he became our teacher and we were working together closely, the idea came up that what would it really take to do something for the West or for something with a modern sensibility. Mm-hmm. And I sort of said in a way, I was a little bit skeptical about this. So I said, look, why don't we take 30 days and we'll sit in a room, we'll fill it with whiteboards, and we will map out what it would take to address this issue. So we know the scope of what's involved. And so 5 of us, the 5 that became the founders of Juniper, all agreed to do that. Myself, Hillary, Rinpoche, Christina, and Pam, all the founders that you can see on the side there. So
it's interesting to me that the approach you're describing is very much a Western business model approach for solving a problem. That's the kind of thing we do in business world, as you have done in the past many, many times to solve problems.
It was exactly like that.
Yeah.
And it was just a way to map out the scope of what it would take.
Yep.
So we sat in a room for 30 days and we just filled whiteboards after whiteboards, and we really looked deeply at what the issues were. We looked deeply at what are the cultural differences between East and West? What are the issues and problems facing Buddhism as it came to America? What are the issues that Dharma centers face? What's the difference between the cultural profile or psychological profile of the modern Western person and the person from Tibet or India? And we kind of mapped all this out. And the result was this roadmap of what it would take to sort of solve all these challenges and make what is really a universal teaching accessible to us. So at the end of that 30 days, I kind of looked at what we had mapped out, and I sort of said to Rinpoche, this is going to take 500 years to do. And he turned around and he said, don't worry, it'll only take 100. So just put one foot in front of the other and keep on going. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what we've done. So we started in 2003, and basically the five of us sat in a room for, well, now 7 years. But of course, 1 year ago, we launched the website, that is the Juniper website. That is the first window into our work. But, that website in a way and the works on it took all of those 6 years to create. But it wasn't just the creation of the content that was happening. The content, in a way, is the surface of what we do. But underneath what was happening was the training and the passing on to the founders from Rinpoche of this amazing tradition. So at least half of it has been our own personal spiritual path and training and development. Because the ultimate fruition of this is when we can say, this incredible stream of wisdom and insight and inner development and all these amazing things is here. It's ours. And we can pass it on to you, just as we've had it passed on to us. And that's something that bakes slowly.
Yes. Yes.
So it's on a different time scale than my other endeavors, that's for sure. But it's also been an unbelievable journey, and now we're starting to share it more and more with others, and we're going to continue doing that definitely.
As I recall, there was a link a couple of months ago about I think there was a seminar that was offered through Juniper?
Yes, we did. We offered a course. It was Introduction to Buddhist Training and Meditation, and we offered it locally at our Redwood City place, and it was a great success. But what we're trying to determine now, you mentioned earlier about how most individuals practice locally, and that local practice is important because that's how you get the connection with somebody. But we also want to make our body of work available to anyone, anywhere. And to do that, we'll need to take advantage of technology, obviously. So the next phase of what we're doing is to enhance our body of content so that anyone, anywhere can do this, in the ways that we will spell out and articulate, through some material, through a collection of materials. And then eventually bring people together through retreats and other means so that there can be that important human connection.
It's interesting that you bring up the technology because that theme has come up again and again, not surprisingly, on the secular and skeptic Buddhist communities online, because of course they're already online, but that we don't really have so much of a local presence, really no matter where we are, of this new Western, not in a particular cultural background kind of Buddhism. And Juniper is one of the organizations that's leading that charge. And I think that is one of the hallmarks that we're going to see in the development of Western Buddhism is the use of online tools. Tell me a little bit more about that and what you have in mind.
in a way, there's two phases to it. So what we put up so far, we think of as like a beacon. It's like the Juniper website, and we have a lot of content on there that is available for download and reading online. But it's like we lit a beacon in the jungle.
Right.
So so its function is to sort of draw people to these ideas and have individuals who are interested to begin to study them and consider them. The next thing that we want to do is put up more content, but this would actually to allow individuals to actually practice this path. So to actually, in the privacy of their own home or community or wherever they are, to have content that they can look at and read and do these practices. We sort of break down the path into three aspects. We kind of looked at ourselves and we said, well, how did we train?
How did we do this?
Because however we trained in the path, then that makes sense for us to show other people the same way. And to us, it boiled down to three elements. The first is meditation. So we all meditate. We've all developed meditation practices. We meditated a lot, so we consider that important.
Yep.
So we need to meditate. The second thing is learning and discussion. We spend a lot of time with Buddhist content and, interestingly, non-Buddhist but related content.
Right.
So we spend a lot of time in other aspects of philosophy, Western science, neuroscience, psychology, the emotions, and see how all these things integrate. So it's an incredibly rich body of material when you combine sort of ancient Buddhist philosophy with modern philosophy and modern science. There's a lot of rich material. So we spend a lot of time both reviewing, contemplating, and discussing that material. So that's our second part, to immerse oneself, not in a scholarly way, but just in a way of exploration and inquiry in this rich body of content. And the third part is to engage with a teacher or a teaching lineage. We believe strongly that, in a way, that is the fuel that energizes one's practice. So it's not a sterile practice, it's not an intellectual practice, but it's fueled by this sort of stream that comes to us from the past, and that's carried in the form of a teaching lineage. And Juniper is the extension of a lineage into modern life. So our goal is to make those three aspects available to others. Learn how to meditate, learn and discuss this material, and be able to connect with a lineage or a teacher. So the next thing that we'll do is put up content for individuals to study and learn so they can begin doing these practices on their own.
Is it one of the challenges that you had mapped out running into a Western attitude of intellectualizing things and not actually putting them into practice? Because we seem to run into that where Buddhism is looked at as an interesting philosophy and people read it, but we sometimes face a challenge having people actually getting to do the meditative practice and to take on a eightfold path kind of way of their moment by moment life. Is that something you're running into?
I would say that's not just one of the challenges. It may be the challenge.
The challenge. Yes.
This is not this is a path in a way that takes us away from intellectualization. The over-intellectualization of our lives and our culture in some way is one of the things that takes us away from these deeper aspects of life.
Yeah, and in the last interview we did for this podcast, Will Davidson, the person I'd interviewed, had said that really coming to an enlightenment and having a grand experience, although that's fine and it could be transformative in your own life, really where it makes a difference is putting it into practice, your interactions with others and enriching that. And I think that's where Juniper is going to help greatly with people in this modern path for modern living. It's not a modern life in a closet that you just hold in. It's how you put it into practice every day.
It's how you put it into practice every day. And, our take is that, the intellectual knowledge is okay, but we have to take action that will sort of take us beyond that. And it doesn't have to be a lot. Even a 5 or 10 minute a day meditation practice, as long as it takes to drink a cup of coffee, can open up within us sort of new facets or give a chance for other seeds to be planted and grow. So it doesn't take a lot, but we do have to give it a chance.
Right, and that interaction itself is where the transformative aspects are viewable to others, and how that seed then grows, because others then do ask, hey, you've changed, and these things are so much for the better. How did that happen?
That's exactly right. Sometimes you don't even notice yourself, and sometimes it's quite subtle.
So you've had a seminar so far. More is coming. Do you have anything that you're developing now that you'd like to share with the podcasters that they can look forward to?
We are developing a body of written content that we would make available for people to be able to read and develop this practice in their own homes. We're planning our first retreat, and all of those things we'll announce over the coming months. We'll be having I don't know when you'll get this podcast up, but we're doing it's on our website. There's a talk being given in Washington, D.C. next week, next Thursday. And for those who want to be there, we are doing a teaching in Rio de Janeiro in September.
There you go. Maybe you could sign up for that one. That sounds fun. A lot more fun than Washington at the moment.
But the way to keep in is to sign up for our email list, which we can do on our website or on our Facebook page, and we'll keep you up to date. But we'll have announcements about these things over the next few months.
And also note that I will be posting these on the Facebook fan page for the Secular Buddhist. So if you're listening to this and you've just found the podcast through iTunes, be sure to go out and check that out, because you will see announcements like this as they come up, because we keep a close eye on Juniper and the fine works they're doing. Lawrence, anything you'd like to say as we wrap up?
No, we really appreciate the work that you're doing. It all contributes to this movement, and we do see this as a movement in a way. And it's interesting, what you said before about the intellectualization about it, because in some ways doing it the intellectual way is not too difficult. It's just learning a body of knowledge, and we could put out a body of knowledge fairly readily. But our work has focused on how do we make this a living lineage for us? One that we can say with great confidence is our lineage, but is the same lineage that goes back 2,500 years. It's the real thing. And to feel that we can hold that, and to be able to say to others, we can pass this to you, just in the same way that we've received it.
Yep, and it's where the rubber hits the road.
It's where the rubber hits the road, and that's why we take our time to do things, and we roll things out when they're ready. We let this grow organically. We don't push it or promote it a lot, because we know it will take time. But it's going great, and we're really sort of we're thrilled in a way, the number of people that come in and want to know what we're doing.
Mm-hmm. And it's one of the things I would note to people who are listening to the podcast. Do go out to the website, and it is linked on the episode page for this particular podcast episode. Go to juniperpath.org, and the content that Lawrence has been describing there, the articles you'll find on there, are really wonderful reading and give you a perspective that if you are a person who is just going to your local Zen center or your local vihara, you may not have this particular view on it from a modern Western perspective. And we know from a lot of the comments we get on the podcast that people seem to be looking for that right now. And I agree, Lawrence, I think this is a movement that has started fairly recently. And I know we've seen more and more sites that are looking at, hey, what is this Western Buddhism thing that we keep hearing about? And we see more and more information on engaged Buddhism. And it keeps going back to not just the intellectualization that you're speaking of, but, yep, we need to practice this. We need to not just meditate, but we need to do it.
Well, I agree with that. One comment I'd like to make just in response to that is you'll notice on our site that we call it Buddhist Training for Modern Life. We never put a qualifier in front of the word Buddhist. We never call it
Western. Right. Yes, you're right.
Buddhism or secular Buddhism or anything like that, because to us that runs the potential of diminishing what the Buddhism is. We practice Buddhist training, the real thing, unqualified by any qualifier that might limit it. And we would say that it is as Buddhist ever was, and hopefully ever will be. So that's why we say, and we thought a lot about this. Should we call this modern Buddhism or Western Buddhism or engaged Buddhism or any of those things? And we ended up saying no. This is Buddhism, the full-on, authentic, real thing. If you want Buddhist training, it's the complete package. But it's for a certain population. So we call it Buddhist training for modern life, meaning it is for a population of individuals that have grown up with what we would call a modern sensibility. Educated in a modern way, think in a modern way, technology, science, and versed in all those things. But for that population of people, it is the complete, unqualified Buddhist path.
And you're absolutely right in that you're not narrowing it down by putting on that qualifier of Western Buddhism. And one of the things that I did notice on the website is you described that it's kind of shaking off the cultural add-ons that exist on Buddhist teaching itself. And it's important for us who are thinking of this as a Western Buddhist movement that, wait, we also need to shake off the Western part. That Absolutely. Is also a cultural.
Yeah, we don't think of this as a Western Buddhist movement. It's Buddhism, but it's because that's the way Buddhism has always gone. Because Buddhism in Tibet was a Buddhism that was adapted to individuals of a Tibetan profile. Buddhism in China, Buddhism in India, it's the same. It is this universal stream of insight and wisdom, but in order to access it, we have to, it has to appeal to us. It has to be accessible. So everywhere it's been, it had to be made accessible in that particular culture. All we're doing is making that same stream accessible to a certain type of individual, modern individuals, but the stream is the same.
Yep, it's a natural evolution of this particular path, as many do, is that they get inculcated in the culture and time in which they find themselves. Well, thank you very much for joining me. This has been fascinating. Good luck with things next week, and that should be about the same time this podcast comes out in Washington, and we will certainly be posting information about Rio, because, of course, everyone listening to the podcast will want to go to that.
Absolutely. We'll see you there.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Ted.
Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
If you would like to learn more about something you've heard in today's podcast, please come visit the website at www.thesecularbuddhist.com. Each episode has its own page with show notes, references, and links to source materials. You'll also find resources on Buddhism, critical thinking, secularism, and links to the Secular Buddhist Facebook fan page. The music for The Secular Buddhist is used by permission from John Kaizen Neptune's CD, Steps in Time. Additional music is provided courtesy of Rodrigo Rodriguez. John Kaizen Neptune and Rodrigo Rodriguez websites are both linked on The Secular Buddhist on the About Music page. Until next time, remember, every moment, every single moment, you choose. Make it a good choice. See you next time on The Secular Buddhist.